This is session 8. This is the session on public finance. I will first invite Mr. Christopher Hoy, Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, to deliver opening remarks, and then the floor will be open for members to ask questions. If you want to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. Secretary will take the floor. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. In order to better support Hong Kong's integration into and service of the overall national development strategy, as well as to align with the National 15th Five-Year Plan, we will continue to strengthen public finance management, formulate tax policy conducive to businesses, optimize resource allocation, and make good use of public finance management tools to ensure promotion of the high-quality economic development of Hong Kong. Now, I will brief members on the major work of the Treasury branch of the Bureau in this financial year, which include the following. 1. Together with other bureaus and departments, we will continue to implement the reinforced fiscal consolidation program put forward in last year's budget in order to achieve fiscal balance in the economic cycle through strictly containing the growth of government expenditure, suitably increasing revenue, and consolidating government's financial resources, as well as expanding the scale of bond issuance. 2. Adhering to the principles of increasing revenue as a supplementary measure and affordable users pay, we have introduced an amendment bill to suitably increase revenue by raising the stamp duty rate for residential property transactions valued at $100 million from 4.25% to 6.5%. This measure is expected to bring in an additional revenue of about $1 billion per annum. 3. Further to bringing back $61.5 billion from 6 seed capital funds to the government's accounts last year, we have conducted a full review of the remaining 36 funds established outside the government's accounts. We propose to bring back about $15.8 billion from 7 funds to the government's accounts and consolidating 6 funds in 2026-27. We reported the review outcome to the panel on financial affairs last Friday. We will also introduce a resolution to LegCo to enable the transfer of the accumulated surplus of the bond fund, about $37 billion, to the consolidated account during the year. 4. The government's capital works expenditure is estimated at about $128 billion for this financial year and is expected to remain at a similar level throughout the 5-year medium-range forecast period. On the premise that the exchange funds function to maintain the stability and integrity of the local monetary and financial systems will not be compromised, we will transfer $150 billion from the investment income earned by the exchange fund last year to the Capital Works Reserve Fund in 2 tranches in the current and next financial years to support the development of Northern Metropolis and other infrastructure projects. The CN Council this morning approved the arrangement. We will approve a $160 billion to $220 billion worth of funds in each of the next 5 years for financial purposes and raise the borrowing ceiling to $900 billion. The ratio of government debt to GDP will stay between 14.4% and 19.9%. Which is highly prudent and well below the levels of most advanced economies. In future, we will issue more longer-term bonds to align more closely the cash flow duration with project requirements. LegCo has finished scrutinizing the proposed resolution. We hope that members will support this passage. The Treasury branch will also implement measures to support citizens and enterprises and reinforce Hong Kong's position as an international financial and trade center. Specifically, 1. To promote industry development and step up efforts to attract enterprises and investment, we will introduce an amendment bill this year to provide tax concession with a half rate or 5% tax rate. 2. We will assist the Financial Secretary in establishing the Advisory Committee on Tax Policy to gather views from the commercial, industrial, and professional sectors so as to formulate tax policies that can reinforce Hong Kong's economic development. The committee will hold its first meeting in the middle of this year. 3. Hong Kong has so far concluded 57 comprehensive avoidance of double taxation agreements, or CDTAs. We will further expand our network to attract enterprises to Hong Kong and help Hong Kong enterprises expand their overseas footprints. 4. On international taxation, we plan to introduce a bill in the middle of the year with a view to respectively implementing the crypto asset reporting framework and the amended common reporting standard in the coming 2 years. This will contribute to international efforts in enhancing tax transparency of digital assets and combating cross-border tax evasion. 4. To alleviate the tax burden on salary earners and support the government's policy on promoting fertility, we have introduced legislative proposals into LegCo on increasing tax allowances and raising deduction ceiling, as well as one-off tax deduction and one-off rates concession as announced in the budget. Chairman, my colleagues and myself will be happy to take questions from members. Thank you. Right, 15 members have lined up so far. We must adjourn this session at 5:25, so I will only allow one question per member. Please keep your questions short. It's a short meeting. Robert Lee, Kissen Yang, Chan Pui Kong, Webster Ng, Tommy Zhong, Lee Kuang Yu, Carmen Khan, Bill Tang, Scott Leung, Lau Ka Keung, Andrew Lam, Albert Zhang, Alan Chen, Ray Wong. Let's start with Mr. Robert Lee. Please, only 3 minutes per member. Make sure this is observed. Thank you, Chair. I just ask one question in the interest of time. 016. According to the reply, in the past 3 years, the rental expenditures on office accommodation of the government in leased premises dropped from $150 million to about $130 million in 2025. To further slash the expenditure, I'd like the administration to tell us, in the next 3 years, how many such leased premises will be vacated and for your department to move back to government property. Right, I will ask the Director of Government Property Government Property Administrator to take this question. Now, the GPA conducts annual review on the use of office premises. Under the premise of meeting operational needs of departments and achieving cost effectiveness, departments now in leased offices will be moved back to government property or moved to offices with a lower level of rent. Now, the member mentioned the rental expenditure of leased premises in the past few years. Indeed, this is a downward trend. In the coming year, about 27 such offices will be vacated because of cost effectiveness consideration. The units concerned will be moved back to government properties or other offices of lower rent. We will save up to $50 million in rental expenditure. Mr. Kissen Yang, just 1 minute for my question. The question is about 005, 008, and 010. 26,985 persons not being prosecuted. So that's a half-half. The mix is that half were locals, half were non-locals. So overseas visitors may not be familiar with our laws. So my question is whether there is any policy to step up publicity on the latest tobacco control policies targeting visitors to avoid having them being caught by the law inadvertently. And about the incentive scheme, so far, only 50. Mr. Yang, this is a session on public finance. Well, please don't stop me. Give me some time. Because you talk about overseas visitors, I don't think this relates to the dollar sign. No, according to the reply, half of the persons not prosecuted were non-locals. It's in their reply. So 51 persons. I'm concerned about the effectiveness of your anti-tobacco measure. Now you have this reporting incentive scheme. You don't want to disclose details, but I want to know how many rewards are dished out. Because from the figures, I want to gauge whether we should do more. In terms of tackling these cases, basically, illicit cigarettes concerning those under the age of 21 seems to be your target. The majority of these cases involve this category. So will you deploy more resources to educate young people about the consequences of selling illicit cigarettes so as to drive down the figures? I'll give the floor to the Commissioner of Customs and Excise. For non-locals and locals, when they bring more than 19 sticks of cigarettes into Hong Kong, we have this policy of not prosecuting them, but then they need to pay a compound fine. I want to clarify that this is not a case of visitors not understanding the tobacco duty in Hong Kong. And as a result, they are fined on the spot. In fact, last year at BCPs and at the Hong Kong International Airport, we arrested members of syndicates. They brought tens of thousands of cigarettes into Hong Kong. They carried luggages full of illicit cigarettes, and they came in groups. And we continue to mount enforcement action against these illegal syndicates. Now, about stepping up publicity and education, we don't just stop at local efforts. We also have publicity campaigns at the BCPs and even across the border in the mainland, including the metro stations in Lo Hu, so as to avoid having the public caught by the law inadvertently. Mr. Chung Pui Kong. A follow-up question on 013. I'm concerned about the C&E department. From the reply, I see that the manpower has been slashed, resources have been taken away. I'm concerned about the effectiveness of the illicit cigarettes enforcement action. According to the reply, in 2025-26, the establishment was reduced by over 10, and then you seized some 50,000 sticks of illicit cigarettes in 2023, 24, 25, with increase in the number of persons prosecuted and convicted, and yet the number of posts were reduced by 10. So I'm concerned about the CNED's efforts in combating illicit cigarettes. I want to know more about that. Commissioner, I thank member for the concern. The C&E department deploys manpower to combat illicit cigarettes. We have a dedicated unit about criminal proceeds. At the front line, we have 400 colleagues covering the land and air and sea checkpoints. All these colleagues take part in our efforts to combat illicit cigarette activities. Despite the tight manpower situation, we continue to leverage technology to cope with the increase in workload, including some high-precision technologies to go after the the cigarette smugglers. We also step up risk assessment at the international front. We work with other law enforcement agencies, including the exchange of intelligence. So despite the same level of manpower and even downsizing of the establishment, we managed to enhance our effectiveness in combating illicit cigarettes. Just take a look at the number of prosecutions and convictions. You will see a drastic increase. At the international front, we work with our overseas counterparts and the mainland counterparts. The number of illicit cigarettes seized also increased drastically. We'll continue with our efforts.
Dr. Webster, thank you. I'd like to follow up on question 034. There are three parts to this question. First of all, my question is on the cost effectiveness. I'd like to ask about there has been a drop in the amount, but in the reply, it is said that the amount of back tax and penalty per dollar of provision is subject to different factors. There is no answer as to increase, decrease, or fluctuations. In relation to difficulty, I asked whether the investigations or enforcement actions were difficult. The administration said that the IRD remains committed to combating tax evasion and tax avoidance. There seems to be no direct answer to my question. The IRD also said that it would review its strategy and introduce systems as appropriate. There's a lack of concrete contents and timetable. Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Benjamin Chan, Commissioner of Inland Revenue, to take the question. Regarding the first question, that is about cost effectiveness fluctuations. All along, the IRD has been combating tax evasion and tax avoidance when it comes to manpower, targets, as well as cases closed. Our target has remained the same. There is the same level of manpower, but of course, when it comes to the cost effectiveness, the costs may change, such as civil service remunerations, expenditures, there may be changes. That said, one factor is quite difficult to control. That is, as for the number of cases closed, how much tax could be recovered, as well as the penalty. Every year, there are fluctuations when it comes to this factor. In the past 10 years, every year, the amount of back tax that we can recover from tax evasion and tax avoidance, there are fluctuations. The amount ranges from $2 billion to $3.3 billion. This explains the fluctuations that we have seen in the amount of back tax. In the past few years, when it comes to tax evasion and tax avoidance, as we mentioned in the written reply, the enforcement actions haven't become a lot more complicated, or the cases have become more serious. But there are changes to the use of technology and the operating environment of the business. There are changes, but we haven't yet identified any more complicated situations regarding how we can enhance the cost effectiveness or the effectiveness of our strategies. The IRD has been using technologies to more accurately identify tax avoidance and tax evasion cases. We want to increase our cost effectiveness when it comes to handling these cases. We have set up a committee just this year on making better use of technology to tackle these issues. One of the focuses is on combating tax evasion and tax avoidance. Thank you, Mr. Tommy Chung. I'd like to follow up on 056 asked by Mr. Dennis Leung. There are different schemes such as infrastructure bond schemes and sustainable bond schemes to support the development of infrastructure. In 2014, 15, and 17, Islamic bonds were issued in these respective years. Does the administration have any plans to issue these bonds once again, especially for long-term bonds to support our public works in Hong Kong? Secretary, regarding the issuance of bonds of a longer tenor, this is actually mentioned in the budget. These are concrete policies that the administration will implement. Does it have to be Islamic bonds? Or do we need to absorb different capital, including the capital in the Middle East? We need to take into account the market situation. We haven't yet seen any new rollout of Islamic bonds. But then they have been taking part in some of the bonds issued by Hong Kong. After all, we have been issuing bonds that are available to all over the world. We will keep a close eye on the market. Thank you. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, thank you. I'd like to ask about 031. On the 27th of March, a bill was introduced to the bill. First reading and second reading of the bill have been completed, but we haven't yet seen any funding application in relation to crypto asset information system. I'm worried if this will be introduced to the Council. When it comes to CARF crypto asset reporting framework, due diligence checks will have to be conducted. An application will have to be submitted to the IRD. There will be a significant increase in the compliance cost on the part of the industry. Will the administration draw reference from other jurisdictions, such as any simplified or streamlined arrangements for crypto asset service providers in order to ease the burden of compliance costs? Will relevant training be provided to the practitioners of the industry? Thank you. Secretary, every time we implement these arrangements, we have a close dialogue with the industry regarding the latest situation in the industry. We need to make sure that the compliance costs will be further decreased when there are latest arrangements. Mr. Benjamin Chan, Commissioner of Inland Revenue, thank you. Regarding the CARF, within this year, we hope to finish the legislative framework. We need to collect information in 2027, and we're going to make it happen in 2028. Therefore, there is still time for us to make preparations. Looking forward, we're going to apply for a funding provision from the Legislative Council that will be on the information systems of the CARF. It is for our preparations. Regarding the due diligence audits of the CARF, it is actually a requirement of the OECD. All members taking part in the framework need to comply with this requirement. That being said, the IRD understands there are small to medium-sized service providers that may need our assistance. Going forward, regarding the information systems or guidance or types of assistance provided in order to help them to be familiar with the requirements, we're going to provide assistance. Ms. Carmen Can, thank you. I'd like to follow up on 064 and 066. Exchange Fund, $150 billion will be transferred from the EF to the CWRF in 2 installments, $75 billion every year. $160 billion will be issued. I'd like to ask about how much of these funds will be for the Northern Metropolis and how much will be for other infrastructure projects. Will the bonds be of a longer tenor? What is the ratio? Regarding 066, I'd like to follow up on the task force following government procurement. Government procurement will be subject to financial audits. So I'd like to know when this will happen. Will reports be made to the Audit Commission? Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Lai to take the question. Our target is to issue bonds worth of $160 billion, and the $75 billion transfer from the EF will be spent on CWRF. Our development focus is still on the Northern Metropolis. So close to half of the net revenue from bond issuance will be spent on the projects in the North Metropolis. This may further increase in the future. Regarding the tenor of bond issuance, taking into account project types, we can see that the time or the cycle of the projects is actually longer. So we want to have bond issuance of a longer tenor. In 2024 or 2025, close to 70% of the bond issuance was less than 5 years of tenor. In 2025 to 26, the trend has been reversed. Over half of the bond issuance are actually over a tenor of 5 years. We want to increase the ratio in order to reduce the pressure on refinancing. When it comes to procurement, regarding product contracts as well as service contracts, we have introduced the financial audits. This is an enhanced measure. It's been in place for a few months. As Ms. Carmen Khan said, after 1 year of the rollout of the policy, we're going to conduct a midterm review. If need be, we will make further enhancements to the policies. Thank you, Mr. Bill Tang. I'd like to ask my question 028. It's about the purchase of cars. Mr. Lok Chung Hong, my previous colleague, was very concerned with this area as well. The government has 7,326 government cars in the government fleet. There are only 331 EVs in the government fleet, accounting for 4.5%. When will the government change all the vehicles into EVs within the government fleet? The percentage now is only 4.55%. Fuel costs are on the increase. So how much has the government spent on the fuel? There are a total of 7,000 odd cars in the government fleet. Please wait on the mic for Mrs. Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the green procurement practice for government vehicles, as mentioned in our reply, we do have a green procurement practice. And when it comes to purchasing private cars, the government must purchase EVs, if and except there are sufficient grounds and with the approval of a directorate officer. Otherwise, the government must purchase EVs. In the past 3 years, about 4.5% of the cars in the government fleet are EVs, and we have actually been increasing the number of EVs when there is a need to replace vehicles. In 2023, we saw a percentage of 2.5%, and it has gone up to 4% at present. Regarding electric private cars, it accounts for about 17% of the government fleet. Regarding the 200 private cars ordered in 2025, the vast majority of them were EVs. In the government fleet, actually most of the vehicles are electric commercial vehicles. We are mindful of the market development. Electric commercial vehicles aren't as mature as electric private cars when it comes to their development. We are being very cautious when it comes to using EVs in the government fleet. We will set up a task force, and we will also identify suitable electric commercial vehicles to be introduced in the government fleet. And I'd like to give you more information. Of course, we need to take the initiative to use EVs in Hong Kong. But at the same time, we need to balance our needs. We need to use public funds very cautiously in order not to cause any waste. That's why we will not advance our replacement of the vehicles before it is needed. We will stay pragmatic. We will also keep a close watch on the vehicle types in the market when it comes to purchasing more EVs. Thank you.
Mr. Scotland. A follow-up question on 043, a question that I put in about the bringing back of money from the funds. A few days ago, the panel on financial affairs discussed the review of the remaining 36 funds established outside the government accounts. I'd like to follow up on part 3 of the written reply. Under the current mechanism, legislative work may be involved. The FCC's approval may be required. There may be different ways of handling these funds, be it the exchange fund or other forms of assets. So it's complex. Will the administration consider establishing a mechanism of bringing back the funds? Say, if the reserve reaches a certain level, it will be automatically brought back to the government accounts. Will there be a regular review to ensure reasonable return and enhance efficiency of public finance management? Mr. Lai will take the floor. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for the question. For the remaining 42 funds outside the government accounts, we conducted a review last year, and then about $61.5 billion of funds from the 6 funds were brought back to government accounts. Last Friday, as explained to the panel on financial affairs, we completed the second round of review, and for the 7 funds, they can be consolidated, which means $15.8 billion brought back to the government accounts. So after completing these 2 exercises, I believe that we will have completed the bringing back of the major funds to the government accounts. As for the remaining funds that are not subject to the bringing back arrangement, there may be 2 reasons. One, for some funds, they are set up for particular purposes, and they may accept donations, such as community care fund, and it's not appropriate to bring back the funds to the government accounts. There are also funds set up for statutory purposes, such as the PWIF. After the fund will be utilized for the severance payment and other special purposes for employees of insolvent companies. So they are not appropriate, they're not suitable for being included in the bring back mechanism. As for the remaining funds, there may be little in the balance. We may want to leave the funds with the relevant policy bureaus. However, if some funds are found to be used in a better way operationally, we will review with the respective departments. Mr. Lau Ka-keung, I'd like to follow up on 062. In the coming 5 years, according to the administration, the money used to repay the bond issuance will go up from 37% in 2026-27 to 70% in 2030-31. If interest cost continues to go up because of market rate fluctuations, will there be any responsive measures? Mr. Lai, thank you, Mr. Lau, for the question. When it comes to bond issuance, as I mentioned, we want to issue bonds of a longer tenor in order to ease the pressure on refinancing. There will be greater certainty and resilience in terms of interest rate fluctuations. Now, expenditure relating to interest payments, I understand members' concerns, but in the past few years, in fact, in the past 2 years, because of the relatively high rate of global interest rate, we tended to issue only shorter-term bonds so that the cost of financing would be lower if interest rates come down. On average, the interest rate stood at just about 3%. And in this financial year, we spent about $16 billion in interest payment. According to the 5-year projection, by 2030-31, the interest payment will be so, and that is comparing to $800-900 billion of bond issuance. At this size, we're talking about $30 billion in interest payment. So under the current fiscal position, we believe that this remains a healthy level. So we have the view that we can manage paying $30 billion of interest when we issue $800 billion of bond. I'd like to follow up on 105, and that's a question on attracting businesses for Northern Metropolis. Invest Hong Kong in 2026-27 will complete a number of tasks. I understand that you've achieved success as set out in the reply by providing tax breaks in the latter half of April. I mean, you managed to attract over 20 strategic enterprises. This will be announced in late April this year. And the tax concession will also be introduced. That is either halving the current interest rate or introducing a 5% rate. Is there a figure in between? How do you determine whether the interest rate should, the tax rate should be halved or whether it should be 5%? And there are different areas in the park. So how do you determine which tax rate to follow? Is it half the current rate or 5%? I'll take this question. Before putting in place the current arrangement, the tax concessions offered target different economic activities such as corporate treasury centers, family offices, etc. We're going to submit an application with LegCo for approval. That is, tax concessions will no longer be offered based on the economic activities, but rather the benefits that these enterprises will bring to Hong Kong. And these benefits should be sustainable. And that is why this is a time-limited arrangement, depending on the benefits to be brought about by these enterprises. These benefits should translate to boosting economic growth. And coming back to the question, we want to keep our tax regime simple. And that is why it's either 5% tax rate or half of the 16.5 prevailing tax rate, 16.5% tax rate, so that interested enterprises will have certainty about the tax concessions they will enjoy. We have an internal mechanism. For example, we have a committee to conduct assessment, and the financial secretary also chairs another committee which makes the final decision. So we're not targeting any specific park or zone. We consider the interest that will be brought to Hong Kong, especially socio-economic interests. And we will consider the matter within the government, especially what benefits these enterprises will bring to Hong Kong. We have only 1 minute or so left. Mr. Zhuang, will you be able to complete your question in just a minute? 076, that's the question I'd like to follow up on. I strongly support raising the proportion of longer-term bonds to be issued. Now, for retail bonds, we mostly issued silver bonds as well as green bonds. Now, for new arrivals, will the government consider setting up another kind of retail bonds? For example, a dedicated proportion of bonds to be issued targeting new arrivals under the new capital investment entrance scheme or top talent pass scheme, so that they'll be able to invest in bonds. Now, the purpose of issuing retail bonds is for Hong Kong citizens to participate in our public works, such as green bonds as well as silver bonds. We want our seniors to be able to enjoy another investment option. So whenever we roll out a new product, we have a target group. We want to benefit the target group through the bond issuance. To answer the members' question about different tenant schemes, should there be special arrangements? Of course, that depends on the cost entailed. When it comes to financing, we don't just consider interest payment, we consider the cost of bond issuance as well. So your comment is noted. That's the end for this session. Thank you, administration, for coming. Members, if your question has not been asked, please use the standard form and hand it to the secretary before 7.